Trade reports are escalating surrounding the Toronto Maple Leafs as a new report from a notable reporter has dropped, revealing some very intriguing insights surrounding Nick Robertson's future in Toronto. We're going to break down that report and discuss what this means going forward as the Leafs are preparing to make big moves ahead of the deadline in February. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, but before we get into it, quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 15,000 subscribers. If you're enjoying the daily Leafs content, this is the place to be for it. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. But Darius, a lot to go over today. The Leafs coming off of a disappointing loss against the Carolina Hurricanes. They were bound to lose one eventually, and unfortunately, it was in pretty disappointing fashion. But we have a lot of new reports, updates surrounding the Leafs trade plans, surrounding what they're trying to do as this deadline approaches. And this new report is surrounding Nick Robertson. Now, obviously, Robertson's been around. His name has been around and been throwing around a ton in trade talks. But a new report from CJ. We're also having some things on Craig Berube's thoughts on him. But CJ on the Leaf report came out and said, it wouldn't surprise me to see Nick Robertson still traded this year. And there's other reports as well. There's some more in-depth analysis regarding this. But Darius, like we've been saying the whole time, there is a high probability that Nick Robertson is shipped out in favor of someone who provides some more steadiness to this team.
Well, it's looking like that at this point, right? He came into this season, we were all thinking, okay, he's going to play top 6 minutes. Hasn't been the case at all the entire season. They signed guys like Max Pacioretty. They obviously have Bobby McMahon, who's held in high regard by management and, of course, the coaching staff. So, obviously, Nick Robertson hasn't had an opportunity to play in the top six. I don't know if he's necessarily earned it this year either, but one thing is for sure. When he is scratched, we saw it last year, when he's been scratched last year, when he's scratched this year, he responds very well. But the thing for me with that is, and again, on the channel, on live streams, everybody knows that I'm a big supporter of Nick Robertson. I don't know if he can do it consistently with this team at the NHL level. I do think he can do it consistently at the NHL level. I just don't know if it's with this team. And I think with what the Leafs want to do and where they want to go, they have to upgrade in areas that would render, his spot on the team obsolete. So I think that there is a really big chance as we creep closer to the deadline, the Leafs are continuing to look at what they need. And when they're looking at what they need, they may be looking at, what are we sending the other way or what do we have to get rid of just to make space?
Yeah, and we saw yesterday, every time he comes off of a healthy scratch or a set of healthy scratch games, he plays well. And yesterday he had a very good game. He had a goal and he was playing good hockey. But it's interesting. And Nick Robertson comes in at number 29 out of 30 on Johnson's updated trade board. Robertson has bit his lips since the summer trade request went unfulfilled by the Leafs, but the situation could come to a head with the team welcoming back more healthy bodies. That's already pushed Robertson out of the everyday lineup, and he's basically had a tough start to the year, failing to gain much traction under new head coach Craig Berube and being unable to produce much offense, and he may get his desired fresh start once the roster squeeze arrives. And not only once the roster squeeze arrives, but also when they acquire inevitably a third-line center, maybe another winger, whoever they end up acquiring. And let's not forget, sometimes it goes unnoticed here. Robertson did request a trade back in the summer, and it was unfulfilled, and they kept riding out. They signed that 1 year, deal in the 800,000 range, and he hasn't really performed well. His trade value is probably lower than it was during the offseason because he hasn't played great. He's been, healthy scratched a bunch, and we thought that it was just a Sheldon Keefe thing. It was healthy scratching sometimes, and now Craig Berube comes out, does the exact same thing. He clearly doesn't fit the Craig Berube play style, and it is evident. And ultimately, it's in the best interest of both parties here, I think, to move on from Nick Robertson, especially when we know all these reports are coming out, like we'll dive into in a minute. The Leafs are looking for a third-line center, but they're also looking for a big body and someone who can give some sustained level of play rather than Nick Robertson, who's pretty boom or bust when it comes to his play recently. And really, it's been a lot more bad than good for Nick Robertson this season. And that's not, to hate on Nick Robertson. It's just he hasn't played the way that Craig Berube wants him to play, but also that Leafs fans expected him to play.
I don't think the Leafs want to get rid of skill to get a bigger body in there, a guy who's more physical. I think they want a mix of a two-way player who can bring physicality, is maybe a bigger body. And I just don't know if Nick Robertson, when everything's all said and done after the trade deadline, if the Leafs get exactly what they want, that he would even get into the lineup if he is still a Toronto Maple Leaf. And we have to look long-term at this point too. He signed until the end of this season. He signed a 1 year deal, right? Like when he did resign, which was surprising at the time, because like you mentioned, he requested a trade. So they only have him for 1 more year. They're going to have to re-sign him again. Does he want to stay here? Do the Leafs want to re-sign him? Like maybe they find him at home here around the trade deadline. So then he can be, happy and whatever, figure out his future in that way. And for the Leafs, they remove a roster spot in that way, and they can bring somebody else in via trade. Maybe it's Scott Lawton, maybe it's Nick Bukestad, all these guys we've been talking about. Maybe they go out and get a bigger fish, but they can add somebody else that brings a little bit more dynamic play to the lineup, which I think they could use in the playoffs, because I'm not even sure with the roster they have, Nick Robertson makes the playoff roster, right? They're rotating guys in and out, but Max Pacioretty didn't play last night. So he does respond well to when he's scratched. That's for sure. It definitely wasn't a Sheldon Keefe thing, specific to that coach. We're seeing it again this year. And yes, he responds well, but the consistency thing, it is a problem. I'm seeing it again this year. And I don't know if it's just, him at the NHL level. I don't think it's that case. I think it's just, him with the Leafs. I don't know if this is a fit anymore. So maybe they start to look for suitors for him. Because again, if it gets to the offseason again, could get a little bit ugly. And then you're looking at a player with almost no trade value, or worse trade value when you get to the summer.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of different reports percolate. You see this here. The Maple Leafs remain focused on upgrading their middle six and could include Robertson as possible trade bait in a package to bring in reinforcements. Potential teams linked to Robertson include Dallas and Seattle. So that's very interesting. We're seeing a lot of different people and reports and rumors specifically circulating surrounding, of course, Yanni Gourde to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And it would make some sense, and it's the first time we've heard teams actually linked. And of course, Dallas, he could play alongside his brother Jason. We're in Seattle. You could get a decent package if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs. Craig Berube spoke out on his game after returning from a healthy scratch. I liked Robbie's game tonight. He worked, skated, and scored a goal. This was, of course, yesterday. He had some other opportunities. He was tenacious, working, skating, and doing his thing. He was a good player. One of the few good players. And Nick Robertson, after a healthy scratch, is better than Wayne Gretzky. It's interesting. You see this here. The kind of net front goals, exactly the kind of goal Berube wants Nick Robertson to score. Immediate impact after coming out. So he had a very good game, and he's been playing better in a nutshell as of late, especially considering and comparing to the start of the season. But when you look at the roster crunch they have, I mean, you think about Pontus Holmberg, you think about Nick Robertson. Those are the two guys who have been talked about most in trade talks, and also, of course, getting healthy scratched. Bobby McMahon's been playing fairly well this season. You have so many other guys. Pacioretty's healthy now. David Kampf, Connor Dewar, all those guys have been playing better than Nick Robertson and Pontus Holmberg have. So that is exactly why they're dangling Nick Robertson in these trade talks. And you also mentioned it. He's in the last year of his contract. So if Leafs, I cannot imagine a world where the Leafs want to extend Nick Robertson at this point. May as well get some value out of him in the form of a trade, because I think you'd be doing best for both sides. You don't have to worry about extending him or letting him walk for nothing. And then the team that gets him for whatever the asset is, of course, potentially has a future home there for Robertson as well.
Another thing in all of this is I think we're all starting to recognize, I certainly am, and I think, well before even yesterday's game, a pattern with Nick Robertson. He's scratched, he comes back, he has a great performance. He's earned the next game, which I think he has in this case again. He will probably play against Vancouver, although we'll see how Berube wants to match up the team against the Canucks, but he has earned another game. Then he'll play a couple more games, and then 4 games in, he won't really do much. He'll get scratched, and then rinse and repeat again, right? He'll come back in. He'll have a really great game. He'll earn his next game. He'll play a few games. Then it kind of dies off, and then it gets scratched again. So it's rinse and repeat. I feel like we've seen this pattern emerge over the last couple of years. Again, the consistency thing is called into question. The Leafs need everybody to be consistent in what they do and what they bring to the lineup if they're going to find success in the playoffs. And I don't know if they have that in Nick Robertson anymore. Again, I don't know if I'm ready to completely jump off the Nick Robertson train, but I think that it is something that they're absolutely going to consider, because if this gets to next summer and he's still a Toronto Maple Leaf, do you really re-sign this player? I don't think so.
Yeah, let us know down below what your thoughts are. Trade rumors are picking up. We're going to keep you updated with all the latest news, and we'll be live following tomorrow night's game. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for watching. See you later.